It's the year 1156. From across the seas, a man of the church, Bishop Henry, arrives in Finland, determined to spread Christianity in this rugged, unforgiving land. He began preaching, baptizing, and organizing church affairs, and he believes he's on a mission of peace. However, soon the name Bishop Henry would be forever tied to a legend of blood and murder, while the name of a peasant Lalli would be seen as that of either a hero or a villain. But what if the most famous murder in Finnish history never actually happened? The story of Lalli and Bishop Henry has been told for centuries, but how much of it is true? Welcome to Beyond Stories YouTube channel, and today I'm visiting the site of this legendary murder to maybe find more to the mystery. The life of Bishop Henry was written about 150 years after his death towards the end of the 13th century. And according to the narrative, Henry was an English-born bishop who served in Uppsala during the reign of King Erik, the Saint of Sweden, in the mid-12th century. Together, they are depicted as rulers of a peaceful kingdom living in harmonious coexistence. However, their peaceful rule was challenged by the non-Christian Finns, who were seen as a threat, and to address this, King Erik and Bishop Henry led military campaigns against the Finns. After conquering Finland, they baptized the local people and built numerous churches. With the victory secured, King Erik returned to Sweden, but Henry chose to remain in Finland. Rather than embracing the life of an high-ranking bishop, he was more inclined to live as a humble preacher, dedicating himself to spreading the Christian faith among the Finns. But after some time, something went terribly wrong. It is believed that at this exact location, inside this chapel, lie the remains of the house where Bishop Henry spent his last night before embarking on a journey that ultimately led to his death. We have now traveled a little further south to the town of Köyliö, and it is believed that in the middle of the woods here, a peasant named Lalli lived in the 12th century, and he was an ordinary Finnish man with a house and a wife. It is also believed that during his journey to spread Christianity, Bishop Henry passed through this very location. However, his presence was not seen as that of a divine figure, but rather as that of a thief. You see, Bishop Henry visited Lalli's home while he was away, and according to the legend, the bishop took some food, beer, and hay and left compensation for them. However, upon her husband's return, Kerttu, Lalli's wife, told Lalli that the bishop had taken all the supplies without paying. That enraged Lalli, of course, and he wanted revenge. So Lalli grabbed an axe, set off after the bishop's sleigh with his brothers, and here at the icy lake of Köyliö, he murdered the bishop. And after the killing, Lalli cut off the bishop's finger in attempt to take his signet ring, but the finger sank into the snow. It is said that the following summer, a boy and a blind man who were out on a boat trip found the finger washed up on the shore. When the boy touched the blind man with the finger, the man regained his sight. It is also said that Lalli took the dead bishop's cowl and placed it on his own head. Upon returning home, he tried to remove the headpiece, but it was so tightly stuck that his hair came off along with it. And finally, according to the legend, Lalli died the summer after the murder, when a swarm of mice drove him up into the top of a tree growing by a small lake. From there, Lalli fell into the lake and drowned. Now you might think that the story ends here, but there has been a lot of suspicion that this whole ordeal never even happened. You see, the story of Lalli and Bishop Henry is one of Finland's most famous and oldest legends and has been a cornerstone of our national folklore for, centuries. However, there are significant doubts about its historical accuracy. First, there's little historical evidence to support the existence of Lalli as a real person. The oldest known written account of Bishop Henry's death, the legend of Saint Henry, was written in the late 13th century, over 150 years after the alleged event. And in this early account there is no mention of Lalli, the lake, or the axe that are pretty much central to the later versions of the legend. It simply states that Bishop Henry was killed by an angry man in response to his religious actions. The first detailed accounts of Henry's death, including the story of Lalli chasing the bishop and killing him, only appear much later, centuries after the event. The Bishop Henry's death song, a folk narrative that includes Lalli's name, wasn't written down until the late 1600s, half a millennium after the supposed murder. This long gap raises doubts about the authenticity of the legend. While it's possible that some form of conflict involving a bishop occurred in the 12th century, the story of Lalli and Bishop Henry has likely been mythologized over time. The idea of Lalli as a heroic figure defending Finland from foreign religious invaders became particularly popular during the Finnish national awakening in the 19th century, when he was recast as a symbol of resistance against external oppression. Although Lalli's act of killing was a locally shocking event, the murder of a bishop was by no means exceptional in a broader European context. The same pattern was repeated in other areas that converted to Christianity during the High Middle Ages. For example, Hungary's national saint, Bishop Gellert, as well as the canonized Bishop Saint Adalbert in Bohemia and Poland, were brutally killed. In newly Christianized regions, it was easy to elevate a local group of martyrs into national symbols. It seems that the story of Bishop Henry and Lalli was naturally part of an international narrative tradition. Finnish research long sought to view all of this as an original story, a voice of the Finnish people from the depths of history. As a result, the clearest international connections of the story have traditionally been overlooked. However, nearly 100 versions of stories depicting the murder of a clergyman are known from present-day Sweden and Norway. These stories also originated as orally transmitted tales, and only from the 17th century onwards were they documented as a part of folk tradition, which is believed to carry echoes from the medieval period. The same applies to the smaller details of the legend. Elements like the bishop's finger and ring healing someone's blindness, or the mice driving someone up a tree or leading them to their death, are motifs commonly found in folktales and legends all across Europe. These recurring themes suggest that such stories may have been shaped more by shared cultural symbols and mythological patterns than by specific historical events. Despite these doubts, the story of Lalli and Bishop Henry has become deeply entrenched in Finnish cultural identity, with many still considering Lalli and Henry to be real historical figures. However, by making this trip to Köyliö and seeing these places by myself, I became convinced that the story's enduring place in Finnish history is a product of myth-making and national romanticism. But as I was taking in the landscape and imagining the past, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the story's significance. It's a narrative that resonates not just with history, but with the soul of Finland itself. But what do you think really happened?